Okay, questions. First question I'm going to ask. Alex, what kind of wonderful books do we have here? Okay, and you know that one of the things I always say is that how our rich capitalist friends never produce anything worthwhile. And it's true. There are, however, to every truth, there are rare exceptions. This is a rare exception of somebody, he is a very minor capitalist by the scale of Brins and Zuckerbergs. His name is Robert B. Strassler. He earned some money, 20 million, I don't know. It's not their scale, not billions. And he decided to produce a wonderful series of annotated Greek classics, which a normal, not very well-educated American could actually work through. They contain multiple maps, pictures, commentaries. It's just wonderfully, wonderfully done. It's also a huge bargain. You could buy paperback. This is hardcover, but paperback is available for Herodotus, I think something like $14.99 on Amazon, which is a book of that quality is a huge bargain. Right? So far, he produced 4 of them: Herodotus, Thucydides, Arrian, the campaigns of Alexander, and Xenophon Hellenica. Sadly enough, he's sort of stuck. I do not know. There might be money problems. I mean, like, he spent all his money. But it is something which I think you should be aware. And I just want to say thank you, Robert, because there is this guy who did something quite wonderful, yes, which will last truly hundreds of years. If you do things like that, they last. Right? These are scholarly editions, highly affordable, very accessible. They are not written, these are scholarly editions, not for scholars, if you see what I mean. They do not assume that you're majoring in classical history or that you're a professor. They assume that you are you. These are books which are for you. They were published for you. Whether you choose to buy them or not, I get no commission, by the way. Except I have to disclose I'm a shareholder of the company called Amazon. So every time you buy something, I get a penny. Questions? Okay,
well, as you ask you to ask your question about personal guilt.
Personal guilt?
Or personal responsibility. You're talking about Helen and...
Or about Helen. Okay, this is a great question. Thank you. Thank you. The question is, okay, let me first start with a quote from Herodotus. Which one is Herodotus? This is Herodotus. So he sort of talks and talks about the following thing. When he goes to Egypt, Egyptian priests tell him, no, Helen never war in Troy. She was here. I mentioned it before, there is this common thing. And then Herodotus, a great mind he is, says, of course she couldn't have been at Troy. If she were in Troy, Trojans would have given her up right away. Why would they keep her? Why would a whole city suffer terrible destruction while they could just send her out? I think he's wrong. I think she was in Troy. And I think she wanted to leave. How do I know? Oh, I read it. Where? In the Iliad. read the end of the third book of Iliad. What happens is there is this challenge. Some of you, any of you reached the third book? Okay, at least 3, 4 guys who read. So if you remember, part of the thing which happens is that Menelaus challenges Alexander, Paris, for a fight. Fair fight. Whomever wins keeps Helen, the rest go home. It's a good deal, yes? And everybody agrees, they swore. And then what happens? Menelaus starts winning. The battle is over, almost. But some force, or the great goddess Aphrodite, grabs him and carries him to his palace and just say, oh, relax. And then we have to read it very carefully to grasp. Again, Homer answers all the questions about everything in the poem. You just have to read it carefully. So, what happens is that Helen is there. She doesn't want to go to Alexander. She doesn't want to see him. She hates him. That's what Homer says. Aphrodite comes as if she's somebody else, an old woman. But that is Aphrodite. And she says, oh dear, go to your husband. He wants you. And Helen says, no. I wish Menelaus killed him. I don't want to go. You want to be his mistress? Go and be his mistress or his wife. I don't want to be with him. That's what she says. I'm not making it up. It's right there in the book. And the goddess looks at her and says, if you don't go, I make both Greeks and Trojans hate you so that you couldn't imagine the terrible death they will inflict on you. It's tough to deal with goddesses. And this is why she is in Troy. She cannot leave Troy. Aphrodite, you know how, Aphrodite is what? Sexual desire. That could keep you any place. Right? So she wouldn't let her go. She wouldn't let Trojans to give her up. They're afraid of Aphrodite. Who wouldn't? She is a cruel goddess. I might get in trouble. But she is. Not at my age. But that's what is going on. So part of the mistake, Herodotus, and by the way, you say, oh, but no modern would make this mistake. No, I just read in the introduction to another translation of Iliad by Stephen Mitchell, where he says, I do not understand why wouldn't they send her out. This is in 2008 or whenever. He still couldn't figure out. They cannot send her out because Aphrodite wouldn't let them do it. It's as simple as that. And you say, well, but I don't believe in Aphrodite. It doesn't matter. Aphrodite is there. She doesn't care about in the Iliad for sure. Right? You have to understand the reality which is described by the poem. The objective existence of pagan gods is outside of scope of this course. But clearly she's part of the discourse. And she's clearly not going to let Helen go. By the way, it will help you. You have to understand that Euripides knows everything I say, but he also sort of knows other things. So if you watch the movie, you have to understand he is literally creates sort of something out of Homer, knowing full well that he's not faithful to Homer. That's all of them did that. By the way, the movie also misses a scene. In the original play, it starts most plays of Euripides would either have gods at the end coming from certain mechanical device. Deus ex machina is this thing which means God out of the machine. That was the typical conclusion of Euripides' play. Sort of somebody is flying, and very sophisticated machines. Trust me, you will be very impressed. But in this, gods do not appear at the end. They appear at the beginning. So if in the beginning, it's actually, there is this important scene with Poseidon and Athena, who are sort of flying up there in the air on top of the stage and telling about what will happen. In particular, that most Greeks are going to drown. So it also sort of starts with a very dark message that right now they want to get the women, but actually they're all going to drown. Sort of he pre-announces all of that. It's a dark, I mean, it's a tragedy after all. So, again, you will see very realistic modern acting, which would be utterly impossible for Greeks. They hated realism. Actors wore masks, painted masks. They sang. These were masked opera. Sadly enough, the music is not preserved. Masks are not preserved. We cannot see it. It is as good as you could get in 21st century. So, highly recommended. Yes?
So, I have yet to read Herodotus, but what I read about his story is that some descriptions of some places like Mesopotamia are accurate. Descriptions of other places like Egypt are grossly inaccurate. So why do you think is that?
Well, this is actually false. He visited, why his description of Mesopotamia are very accurate, description of Egypt are not very accurate. I don't know books you read, you shouldn't be reading them. I told you the book you should read. It answers all your questions. It has detailed notes about accuracy, and it will tell you that he was personally in Egypt. It's very unlikely that he ever visited Mesopotamia. So do not believe, again, my advice for most people that most books which you read or are going to read will tell you things and you will not even understand them. Read the sources. Life is too short to waste on, it's hard for me to even answer. You are referring to unnamed book, which says something. No, but it's not true. Nothing. Lots of stuff. He traveled extensively. He traveled way more than, say, Plutarch. Plutarch never left oikoumeni, the civilized world, the Greek world. I mean, he was a Roman dignitary. He was an important person. During Roman times, nobody would cross the border because, they're just barbarians there. Greeks were much more open. Herodotus was a great traveler. He did go. He collected information. He asked sources. Some sources were good. Some sources were awful. But he was the first, look, how can I put it? Take any other tradition. Nobody ever asked questions. Nobody ever bothered to ask what is going on with other people. Nobody ever tried to write down traditions of other people. He is the first person in the world who said that traditions of Egyptians are worth finding out. This is just the attitude, again, as we shall see later. The Greeks had the mental attitude unlike anybody else ever. And I include us. These were the people who suddenly cared about others. They would want to know. And by the way, you know my attitude to Plutarch. How great he was and all of that. And he was great indeed. He wrote a little booklet called On the Malice of Herodotus, where he criticized Herodotus greatly for mostly what? Being philo-barbarian. He loved barbarians. And it's true. It's not that in this great battle between Persia and Greece, he is of course on the side of Greeks. Because the cause is just. But he tries to tell you all kind of good things about barbarians, about their virtues. Where else do you find a book where virtuous people are not just your people, but people from far different lands, different religions? I do not know such. Right? So Herodotus is remarkable. Yes?
What is Herodotus' approach to gods?
He, unlike what was Herodotus' approach to gods, he reports, I have to say that he was probably a typical Greek of the first half of the 5th century. That is, he didn't take stories seriously. Nobody did. They were all deeply religious. Every Greek knew that there was some supernatural forces active. We will get to. He never discusses it. We will see much more clear understanding the next lecture when we start talking about Socrates. But sort of the notion of, he was not a contemporary atheist in today's term. They did not exist till 18th century. Pagan gods. You have to understand that Greeks in general believed in this sort of methodology where you remap gods. You went someplace. For example, there is this amazing essay by Plutarch on the God of the Jews. This is written, by the way, around year 100 AD. So at that point, the first Christianity is already here. Philo wrote, Josephus wrote. I mean, we are, And what does he say? He says, seems that their god is actually Dionysius. Because he needs, his pattern is to find a mapping. Wherever you go to Egypt, you say, oh, they have these gods, so we have to map their gods onto our gods. It will happen, we will talk more with Rome, where the entire Rome pantheon gets mapped onto Greek pantheon and gets all the legends together with it. So the Greek attitude was there. Of course, they have gods, we have gods, we use different names, but let's establish one-to-one correspondence. Right? So that's what he did, and all the Greek. These were Greeks, right? And the Plutarch never viewed, for example, in case of Jews, even the idea that they have something, special God. What do you mean special God? I mean, how could he be special? Right? He would not be amazed with the notion of monotheistic religion. It was around, but the notion of a God who cannot be shared between two nations, that he couldn't grasp. That is an exclusive notion of the Jews, by the way. Sort of this is our God, and he's jealous. This is specifically jealous. We will be talking about it. But sort of for Greeks, even well-educated Greeks, they would immediately, wherever they go, they would attempt this one-to-one correspondence. And sort of, they even with heroes, they would go someplace, there was some statue of some hero. They said, yeah, looks like Heracles. So, I mean, they would find, they sort of assumed that you could do this mapping. It's like, You know, you go to China, you see some of their movies now, and you say, oh, that's Superman. Because, and this is their version of Spider. I mean, you sort of have to establish a mapping. They believed that gods were universal in general. Therefore, they would just never question that they could be different. Remember, Poseidon went to Ethiopians. That's sort of they were barbarians. They were not Greeks for sure, but obviously gods are gods of all. And eventually, again, we will see what happens. I mean, you have to distinguish between sort of literary religion of Homer, which is not religion. This is just actors in a movie, if you like. It's very deep, very important movie, but it's just this layer. Then there is a layer of religion which people truly use. That's when they go to shrines, right, where they do sacrifices. And the most, for example, in Athens, the most important religion is this mystery religion of Ulyssean cult, Ulyssean mysteries. We know nothing about it because they practice it for 600 years and they never leaked any information. So that we actually do not know what is the most important Greek religious thing was. It was hidden. You swore that you will never tell. Sometimes people, for example, there is a story that Aeschylus was accused of revealing some of the mysteries. And, but he won the court case because he proved that he didn't know, whatever. But there was this mystery religions which they were truly internally committed to. We'll get more to it. But Herodotus has a very simple attitude. You sort of say, well, we go there, and there was Temple of Zeus in Egypt, maybe not, but you know, he does mappings. He sort of knows that every Egyptian divinity is one-to-one mapped onto appropriate. He might not know exactly, but it exists, right? Sort of. And he clearly, you also have to understand that when a Greek is pushed, he will talk about God versus Zeus versus Athena. Sort of. When they talk about justice, God requires justice. So there is this background monotheistic feeling among most of them. It's complicated. But thank you. Yes, him.
Just to bring a little bit of materialistic context of the Helen story, it always, during Baldwin's, attempt to bargain, it was Helen and her riches.
Yeah, they would have given riches. They would have given, look, they knew, again, if you read Iliad, what you clearly feel among the Trojans is the sense of an impending doom. They know they're going to be defeated.
Right, but apparently they were not willing to depart with the riches to
No, it's not the riches. I claim it's her. And again, you have to, when you read Iliad, gods are active players. And you have to, just say, well, let's take materialistic point of view. Well, then go and read Pavlik Morozov's story or whatever materialistic story. This is not a materialistic story. I mean, gods are active participants. I mean, they go places, they fight, they actually fight. They get wounded. God, Aphrodite. So, I mean, and she screams, whatever. So, it's not, you have to move yourself to the sort of plane of discourse. Sort of, if you want to say, no, I don't believe any of that, go away. I mean, you cannot understand the story. By the way, as I say, very few Greeks would view that as really like gods. Many, many times Homer is attacked for demeaning gods and telling all these horrid stories about them, right? Right? Then another group of people come saying, no, but we couldn't attack divine Homer, so they come with another. These are all needs to be made into allegorical statements, right? Which, later on, for example, when Philo wants to present Old Testament to the Greeks, he does the same. I mean, no, we don't really believe in all that. It's all allegorical. We really do not demand that little children should be slaughtered, but it means something else. So the idea of reinterpreting texts, we're going to see time and time again. But it was a problem. I mean, yeah, obviously, sort of, from the point of view, if you like, theology, these are rather, I mean, Zeus is always getting racy, and you're too young to even to know. I mean, it's just, Hera wants to have some effect, she shows her leg. I mean, this is literally what is going on. And so people were saying, no, it cannot be true. And you have to understand that on the level of Iliad, it is true. We have to learn to read, going back to the questions about flying things in Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, things fly. I mean, it's just, in Iliad, gods fight. It's just so. It's like modern man totally lost this ability. Not for the first time, because the Greeks had the same problem. Sometimes I encounter the same problem when I read, say, Herodotus. He's confusing these planes. He says, well, but it couldn't be because, he doesn't want to take this presence of Aphrodite, who restricts Helen's movement, as real. He's trying to rationalize. So, so.
Yeah. So the dubious books that I read say that some of the mysteries were actually, I mean, we know something about some, maybe not the Athenian ones, but we know something about other mysteries, right? The artifacts that were used and such.
Well, we know quite, what do we know about mystery religions? We know quite a bit, but the effective story is that when you go and read any book about Ulyssean mysteries, we know nothing. We know outside things, we know what words were said, we just don't know the meanings, because he's seen these things when he was shown. We don't know what things. Right? So yes, they managed to keep the secret throughout. Again, we shall see. It's, we will talk more about religion the next time, because we will have to talk about Socrates, who the next lecture is going to be about Socrates. And Socrates, as you probably know, was condemned to death for being an atheist. He was probably the most religious person in the world at that time. So we'll have to reconcile that. How come a person who is a true mystic, we will discuss what it is condemned for being an atheist and executed. So it's an interesting fact. He also is going to answer us many questions which Herodotus and Thucydides were asking. So the next lecture is going to be about Socrates. So I'm spending lots of time on Greeks, but no, they deserve it, in my opinion. So, ancient Greeks. I could spend some time on medieval Greeks, but I didn't plan to. They had some remarkable people there too, but not quite. Again, you have to understand. Let me remind you the plan of the course, because people always seem to sort of forget what I announced right at the beginning, but it still stands, and maybe I should remind the end of every Q&A. My goal is to explain contemporary American civilization. That is, the texts which I talk, the stories which I discuss, have to be alive in some sense here. Right? I recommend Plutarch, not Herodotus, because guess what? Abraham Lincoln read Plutarch and did not read Herodotus or Thucydides. It's just a fact. Right? I'm going to, for example, I'm going to talk about Christian theology. If I were talking about, not Christianity, different Christianity, Christian theology, I will pick one branch of Christian theology. Which branch? Protestant. There's only naive people believe there's Protestant theology. It has multiple branches, very distinct. Huh? The Church of England, Anglican theology, is very, very different from Lutheran theology, which is different from Reformed theology. And I'm going to concentrate on Reformed theology because for our ancestors, I mean, not our, but our in terms pilgrims, they were Puritans. They were following Calvin. They were bringing, believe it or not King James Version Bible, but Geneva Bible. Right? So I have to make a choice. I have to, it's not that I think he's a greater theologian than Augustine or Aquinas. But he is, you have to understand, if you want to understand America, you have to understand American political tradition. For example, when we're going to be talking about sort of legal tradition, I'm not going to talk about Montesquieu, the greatest French legal philosopher. Huh? Why? Because I have to talk about Blackstone's commentaries, which were the text which founding fathers brought. You have to I mean, in some sense, I have to, this is not a judgment, again, I repeat, of what is better. For example, I'm not going to talk about Racine, a great French playwright, who is literally up my valley because all his plays are about Greek heroes. They're really wonderful for me. But I cannot, because neither Jefferson, nor Lincoln, nor whatever, Woodrow Wilson seem to know him. They know Shakespeare. So I have to do Shakespeare. So when I do these choices, I'm trying literally to figure out what our civilization is. So I claim that Greeks, especially Greeks I mentioned, are central part of that. But I'm going to be dropping lots of very, very important people, and this is not I'm not trying to establish who is greater than who. I'm trying to say that's the flow which leads to Zuckerberg. To modern world. We have to understand the modern world. And we have to understand, we have to agree that we are Americans by being here. I wasn't born here, but I spent 40 happy years, so I have to. That's my only passport. The other country took away my citizenship, so that's the only thing I am. And I think that if you want to be happy here, if you want to be productive here, you have to understand what it is. if, you don't have to join the Reformed Church. I have no immediate plans. But you have to understand the Reformed tradition. You have to understand because, again, great American universities, you think, oh, they're all secular. Oh, no, they all was started as, Reformed or, Episcopal or maybe Unitarian for some strange places. But, none of them were started as secular. I'm talking Harvard's, Yale's, University of Virginia, places like that. So the tradition, we have to understand the American tradition. So I'm just sort of explaining that, I have to narrow. Otherwise, the amount of stuff is infinite. And there is a perspective, from any country, you could teach this course from the point of view of Switzerland. There is Swiss tradition, Wilhelm Tell, but...
So it talks about happiness and how in the eyes of the Greeks, your life can be judged as being happy past your death.
That's what Solon said, yes.
Can you be happy while still being alive?
You don't know if you had a happy life. That was the question. That if you have to look at the Solon's point, that we're of course to say, this second is what matters. Greeks clearly viewed the whole life from the beginning till the end as this totality. I'm presenting again. I'm not defending anything. I'm just stating what was. For Greeks, this story about Solon was central, that you cannot, and they viewed heroic death as something very central. You encounter, if you read Herodotus, whichever one, this Herodotus, if you read Herodotus, it appears time and time again. He describes, say, Battle of Plataea, and there is one Spartan warrior who is the most handsome guy, not just among the Spartans, but all the Greeks. And he starts marching, and then he gets wounded by an arrow. And he walks a little bit more and then collapses and dies. And as he dies, he says, I do not regret that I die for my country, but I regret that I didn't get a chance to fight for it. This is, we have to take this worldview as they had it. That's what they record time and time again. What is the most glorious death? Dying for your country. We shall see it when we talk about Socrates. We shall see it in extreme case. Right? But sort of Greeks thought that sort of life is integral. It's not just collection of seconds. It's life. They had this notion of, they even viewed the universe as this sort of sphere, closed. Everything is closed. Look at Greek sculpture. This perfectly balanced, closed form. Even if they have a sculpture of a dying someone, it's still just perfect, closed form. So, yes, that's what they viewed. They viewed happy life as life with happy end. Where happy end, they didn't define the way we define it. It's just, again, for Greeks, it was, the idea of, you often hear when modern people talk, they say, oh, I would like to die without knowing that I'm dying. I'm sure you heard that. Sort of, I just walk somewhere, I walk to a bar and drop dead. That's a happy death. Not for a Greek. First of all, a Greek would want to face death. Mano a mano, you don't. You're not afraid of him, Yes? This is why the death in battle is so wonderful, because you know that you're going to die. They didn't look well upon living to 95 being senile. We will be discussing later on, we will be talking about Swift. And he has this beautiful section about long life, which we will. Swift was an English 18th century writer, the one who went to Lilliput's. Lilliput's, they deny Lilliput's existence. We have one of the important things is try to understand that, there were people who saw the world differently. It's not, our point of view, whatever it is, might not be universal. It is not universal. It's certainly enough, it is becoming universal in terms of this consumer. I mean, the guy who dies with most toys wins. You heard that. You have? Now you have. So that's the official point of view. So if you accumulate most Ferraris, the one who dies with most Ferraris goes to paradise. So, to the cloud. You drive your Ferrari into the cloud, into the singularity. But again, this is not, for Greeks, this is, look, the reason they were telling the story about Croesus was precisely that it is not about money. They did not believe it was about money.
So when does this notion of dying for your country as sort of being a glorious end change?
When did it change? 1968. I don't know. Whatever. I mean, people were still, don't forget, the notion, well into the beginning of 20th century, military were viewed, people in the military were viewed as heroes. Joining the military was a noble and honorable thing to do.
Actually, speaking of American society, that is kind of...
It's no longer true. It's no longer true. But for example, one of the clearly good things about Israeli society, they still view military as an honorable thing to do.
Well, I guess part of the American society also still views, just not the part that is prevalent in this part of the world. California.
Well, for one thing, they abolished the draft. Saying that, we have to pay people. If it's an honorable thing, people should pay them to serve. It should be a different mindset. No, it's no longer in Europe. In France, being an officer used to be a great thing. Come on, who is the greatest Frenchman of all times? Napoleon. Okay, if it's not Napoleon, then it's Saint Louis, who was also a great fighter. So, French were not wimps. Huh? Well, for sure they were not wimps, whatever flaws they had. Wimpiness one. Now French are wimps. No, compare with French of old. It's not nobody, none of you look the people in the government, none of them served. None of them were in the military. De Gaulle was a great warrior. He was, I'm not joking. He was a brave soldier. He was a brave... What?
It takes war, constant and permanent, small and big.
I don't know what it takes. I don't know. The attitude changed. What I see is that, the country which used to be led by de Gaulle is led by people like Sarkozy, and that's Big difference. Holland, of course, takes military actions on a motor scooter. At night, he puts a motor scooter and goes on military expeditions. He picks girls. So he is not clearly military hero type. Right? And I could go on. I mean, it changed. So the idea of dying for your country, for de Gaulle, it was the idea. I have no doubt that he thought it would be glorious to die for France. And if you ask him, what is the most glorious death? He would say, dying for France. It was, what else? Right now, nobody, they shifted observe. De Gaulle resigned in 69. So till 69 in France, a military hero was the president. And by the way, after that, not one of them was a military hero. No, but they were, they were of serving age. Yes, so it's something changed. By the way, I'm as anti-war as you could come. And I suspect that most heroic guys, for example, Spartans, were extremely anti-war. One of the lessons of Thucydides is that it's capitalists in a democratic society who are typically warmongers, because they want to go and conquer something for their business. These who were driving Athenian expansion, it was not soldiers. Soldiers were extremely conservative, both Spartans and Athenians. Nicias, a great Athenian general, was extremely conservative. The only thing he wanted was peace with Sparta. Every time there was every general looking at the war knows what a horrid waste it is. You hear words from Agesilaus, from Epaminondas. What a waste. What a waste. And indeed, Greek wars were terrible because there were these Greeks dying on both sides. But glorious thing it was. It's not good. We have to distinguish glorious and good. The war is not good. Dying for your country is a glorious, good death. Difference. So we have to, and it's not, right now people say, and he's a militarist on top of everything. I guess I am in that sense. I think it's an honorable thing to serve. Let me tell you something for which that will clearly. I would introduce the national service in this country like that. This is why I will never be elected, even as a dog catcher. But I think that people, I didn't say draft, by the way. I distinguish between national service and draft. National service means that you should be able to do non-militaristic things. You have to serve, militarily or otherwise. By the way, for both men and women, if it were up to me. Again, national service, not necessarily militaristic. So I think that service is good. Again, whatever hopes I had to run for senators, I think I just killed it. But we have to understand that in most societies, service used to be viewed as a great thing. Your position in the society very often was determined by yes.
There's no other question. So you alluded in Herodotus that he views other cultures as very fruitful,
interesting, exciting
exploration. What is it that the Greeks are learning from the other cultures and bringing and integrating into their society?
It's a good question. What do Greeks learn from other cultures? Well, for sure we know in this course, I'm not going to talk about Pythagoras. I already taught a course where I talked about Pythagoras. But, you know, they brought lots of mathematical knowledge from both Egypt and Mesopotamia, Babylonia. And, of course, they created something incomparably greater. But that's another story. The most important thing that Greeks get from other cultures is writing. Phoenicians. They make an astonishing breakthrough. They introduce vowels, which all the Semitic people, they still don't have them. They don't care about vowels, right? So, but you know, they introduce vowels, but you know, they borrow. Greeks borrow left and right. Greeks become the main maritime power in Mediterranean. Where did they learn it? Same Phoenicians. Right? So they of course they become sort of, they observe the Phoenicians' idea of starting colonies. And guess what? They cover Mediterranean and the Black Sea with colonies. There are some fundamental ideas, of course, which they invent, which they do not borrow, and lots of them. But they're Greeks. Sort of, they start with something, very often very humble stuff, and then they produce something. And within, by the way, do not get any ideas that it lasts forever. It's going to be over in 170 years. It's going to be over. The creative phase stops. 323 BC. In math, it goes on for another till 211 BC, another 100 years, then stops. Funding disappears, you know, whatever. So
Because of the rise of the
Macedonian Empire creates the enormous push for research, but mostly in terms of mathematics. If you think about all the great mathematical accomplishment, again, Euclid takes whatever was taught in Plato's Academy, moves to Alexandria, and writes the canonical text, which, if I am to talk about short canon, clearly is a part of a very short canon. And then creates Musion there with multiple people like Eratosthenes, say, working. And of course, Syracuse becomes a major science center with Archimedes. But then by the end of the century, it disappears. The science is done. Romans do not care about science. They care about engineering. This is, again, you know, there is this book, From Mathematics to Generic Programming, you might have heard. And that book, whomever the guys who wrote it, they quote from Cicero, Tusculan Disputations. And Cicero says that among the Greeks, mathematics was treated as the highest thing of all, while for us, it is just the practical stuff. Mathematics stops. So the Greek tragedy stops literally with, not with this, but about with this. By the time of the death of Euripides, which is approximately 406 BC, this is it. There is no more great tragedy. Not one, not ever. At that level, not ever, forever. You know, Shakespeare does something else.
So could it be that this is due to the fact that, you know, I'm thinking of Pericles, you know, as a charismatic person who invites all these artists to come to Athens rather than, you know, Athens as a society sort of being the, giving the germs of
Yeah, but somebody elected him. You see, we do not elect. We don't have a Pericles here. With all due respect, Barack Obama is no Pericles. I voted for him, by the way, do not misunderstand. But Pericles, he is not. Right? So there was sometimes things happen. You cannot explain. It's like, how come in Vienna you have a sequence of composers going like Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Brahms, Mahler. Little place. And then it stops. Name me any contemporary Viennese composer. I know about Second Viennese School, but most of you do not, and rightly so. So things stop. You look at Florence, produces the greatest art ever from, well, roughly speaking, Giotto, roughly speaking, till the death of Michelangelo, and then it stops. They create the greatest museum, they hang all these pictures, but there's no new art. They still have Medici dukes, but nothing. Things stop.
So there is no theory why it happens, like maybe some economic development.
They were very prosperous economically.
Yeah, but
Of Vienna, I mean, what happened in Vienna in 1911 when Mahler dies? Why would this great tradition, which had bang, 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 great composer, and then it stops? When I was teaching this math course, I was giving an example of mathematicians in Göttingen, which go like Gauss, Riemann, Dirichlet, Dedekind, Minkowski, Klein, Hilbert. And then it stops. Do you know any mathematician in Göttingen now? Not I. So this, in 100 years, they create more math than, well, excluding Greeks, maybe anybody else ever. And then they stop. You could attribute it to Hitler. There's huge demise because of expulsion of the Jews. But most of the people whom I named, except Minkowski, were not Jewish. They were German. So it stopped. The vibes are not there. This is why we have to be very careful, very precious when we deal with culture, with civilization. Things like that disappear. They do. Right? We take them for granted. We think that, somebody will take care. No, you are somebody. I'm pointing at Ryan. So that
are there any places of power, sort of, where this tradition holds?
Are there? Do you know of any? No. Neither do I. Yes, I cannot name. It's not that when Beethoven was composing, nobody knew that there was this great, there is this myth that when people write music, or whatever, poetry, nobody knows. Trust me, when Beethoven was writing music, everybody knew that Beethoven was writing music. He was not bowing to crown princes when he would meet them. He knew he was the greatest person in Austria, or maybe in the world. So it might not be so for Schubert. He was a much nicer person. But, people knew. And right now we have what we have. Who are our heroes? Kardashians. I don't know who they are. But I don't know who Kardashians are. But every morning when I open, what is on the floor? Kardashians did something. Right? So I guess that's our heroes. Or, you have to believe what you read. Do we have any great writers? or Stephen King. So, no, we don't. We don't. It's not. People knew when Tolstoy, who was a great writer, I'm not going to cover him in the course, great writer he was. When he died, what happened in Russia? Russia stopped. Everybody was on the street. It was a national mourning. Everybody knew that Tolstoy was dead. He was not, it wasn't done by the government. Government hated him. But Tolstoy was dead. I remember when Shostakovich died, I was back in Soviet Union. Everybody, that was a tragedy. There was a great composer. We knew he was a great composer. Everybody was sort of running around. What are we going to do? Are we going to attend the funeral? I mean, it was something to be done. Shostakovich is dead. And right now, it's Kardashians or Lady Gaga. Oh, I am waiting. Yeah, and it's not, by the way, people say, oh, you're just an anti-American guy. No, this country had great people. Lincoln was a great, great hero. We will be talking about Lincoln. Martin Luther King was a great man. He was. I don't know such people now. I mean, this country is not great because of its musicians. You know, it's not comparable to Austria. But in terms of, people like, founding fathers, Lincoln, people who fought for civil rights, specifically Martin Luther, these are people next to, there's nothing to be ashamed. They're very great people. And again, we shall see that, again, they all connected to other, they didn't come out of nowhere. Right? And when I talk about, say, Martin Luther King, I'll have to talk about Gandhi. This will be my second entry into India, but of course, when I talk about Gandhi, I'll have to talk about Tolstoy. Because some of you might not know, but Gandhi was extremely influenced by Tolstoy teaching. And his first ashram he called Tolstoy Farm. It's a dead giveaway. If you call your place Tolstoy Farm, you're most likely are influenced by Tolstoy. So, so the world connects. There are all these threads, but we have to find them. And right now, of course, we are in this period. There are these periods in history which are boring. But, on the other hand, the Chinese proverb about living in interesting times. The fact that we do not live in interesting times might be a big blessing. We don't have wars, revolutions, whatever. This is good. This is good, guys. Another 15 years, then you could have revolutions. In about 15 years, I will be traveling someplace far, far away. We have been talking way too long. Bye.